Thank you. If you know it, it's a good one to do. Are you ready?
I don't really know it.
Okay, which surah you know?
Fatima.
Do you know Surah Kawthar? Inna atayna
No, I only know Fatih.
No, you know like 20, I know.
No, it's just I forgot all them.
What was Surah Nas? قل أعوذ برب الناس
I forgot the
قل أعوذ برب الفلق
forgot all of them.
والعصر.
No, only
Surah Fatiha?
Yeah.
Okay. ومحمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صلوات.
شابه شابه. Podium mic's on, right? Yep. Thank you, brother. Thank you, Ali.
حضور محمد وآل محمد. ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی اس ننھی سکینہ نے غم کتنے اٹھایا گوہر بچھنی دامن ظالم نے جلایا ڈر بھی لگتے مجھ کو لگتے تھے تماچے بے حال میرے لاشاں تمہیں کو نہ رلائی ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی جیسے ڈر سے تیرے بابا ہائے بے کفن ہے جیسے ڈر سے زخموں سے شرع اس کے بدن ہے اس شام کے زندہ میں ویسے میرے تن ہیں اے باپ اور اے بیٹی تقدیر اے قطن ہے ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی معلوم اے دل غم سے سالب اے تمہارا آنکھوں نے دل دیکھا اے شبیر کا لاشا بند رسن دیکھیں جو زینب کے پردہ جو جب دیں کہ مجھ کو تو پائے دیں کدل پہ یا ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی اے خون اے بر آنکھیں اب دیتے گواہی تم آل پیمبر کے ٹکتی او تباہی پر حرم سارے دیکھا اے خدائی قسمت بس اے میری زندان کیسے ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی ایک بین کو دفنائے کیسے پہ یا دل ہے ایک سمت مصیبت سے دل ڈر سے ہمیں لائے کسی ٹر سے ہاتھوں سے ایک قبر بنائے ہاتھوں میں جو الرضا اور بندے سے لاصل ہے ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی جب ڈالی غسل ڈالے کل رہے تھے زخموں کو ڈک کرتا حیدر کے بر رہا تھے زخموں سے بچنا سارے میرے بھی بے برا ہے ایسے خواہ سے بچنے کو تم دفناؤں گی ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی آتی ایک قضا میرے لیکن ایک تمنا زندان کے اندھیروں میں جب مجھ کا سلایا ایک چھوٹی دیا میرے تربت جینا اور اہل حرم کا یوں تم پر نہ سہارا ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی اب بھی ایک جانی ہے سکینہ کے گزارش تم میرے زیارت کی ہر دم کر خواہش آندے رو میں سوتی ہوں خاموش کہ بارش میں باس تمہارے کروانے جو گائے ایک بخشش ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ مجھ کو اپنے ہاتھوں سے کیسے پائے تم دفناؤں گی ہائے سجاد ہائے سکینہ حضرت محمد و آل محمد
صلوات تیری امت کے زیور پہن کر تیری امت کے زہر پہن کر نانا چلی ہوں میں شام شام ہائے شام شام ہائے شام मैं देती कफन तुझको भैया, गर सर पे रिदा मेरे होती, गर होते खुले हाथ मेरे, तेरे जख्मों को हाथों से धोती। पाबंद रसन सहरा पढ़े ना देखो भैया, चली हूँ मैं शाम शाम शाम। जिस ज़ैनब को तूने न देखा, नजरे उठा कर न देखा, हाथ रस्सी से मेरे बंधे हैं और सर पर नहीं मेरे पर्दा। कैसे कूफे में जाऊंगी, गाजी जब बलवे में आएगा नाम, शाम हाय शाम। तेरी उम्मत के जेवर पहन कर, तेरी उम्मत के जेवर पहन कर, देखो नाना चली हूँ मैं शाम शाम हाय शाम। सलवात।
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. I just want to take a few minutes and this opportunity to express our thanks to Shaykh Dr. Muhammad Ali Ismail for coming for these last few nights on behalf of the community. I'm sure everyone can feel the same way I do, that we've had our hearts and our minds touched by his riveting lectures in these last 12 nights, and inshallah tonight as well. We've been deeply honored to have Shaykh visit us from England, come to Edmonton, enjoy our weather, and it's been mostly pleasant, and really engage with the community. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from everybody, men and women, boys and girls of all ages, and he's really left a touch and a mark on this community, and we are really looking forward to have him back. So on behalf of the entire community of ISIA, Shaykh Dr. Muhammad Ali Ismail, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for delivering your lectures. And we look, inshallah, forward to having you back, hopefully very, very soon. And with that, I'd like everyone to invite Shaykh up to the minbar with 3 very loud salawat for his last lecture of the series.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا مرضت فهو يشفين صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. In this final majlis of the current series, I'd like to examine the topic of caring for others. And in the process, I will pay tribute to the paragon of caring for others, As-Siddiqatul Sughra, Zainab al-Kubra, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this evening I'll seek to answer 4 questions. First of all, with regard to caring for others, what examples can we give from the Holy Lady Zainab where she cared for others? Secondly, what do modern studies tell us about the benefits of going to visit the sick in hospital? Thirdly, what is the etiquette of visiting the sick? And fourthly, what are the rewards of visiting those who are sick? Inshallah, let's discuss the very first question with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the first question was, what examples can we give from the life of the Holy Lady Zainab where she cared for others? And then we'll see what we can learn from this as well. Now, there are plenty of examples, some of which I've mentioned already in previous majalis, but let's just go through some of these. So when she was 6 years old, she cared for her holy mother, Lady Fatimah Zahra, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Before her martyrdom. Then she cared for her holy father, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And she did that after he would be injured in the battles that he took place in, and also when he was struck on the head that led to his martyrdom. Also, we know that she cared for Imam Hassan, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So after he was poisoned, she cared for him. Then, of course, we know that she cared for Imam Sajjad, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In Karbala, we are told that she cared for him all the time, and in fact, Imam Sajjad himself reports that on the night before my father was martyred, I was sitting and my aunt, Lady Zainab, was with me and she cared for me. This is a report that has reached us from the 4th Holy Imam himself. And then fifthly, we know that she cared for the children of the captives after Karbala and some of the women as well. So again, as an example, the 4th Holy Imam reports himself that after we were taken captive, my aunt Zainab would always recite the prayers, whether they be obligatory ones or the recommended ones, standing. On the way from Kufa to Sham, she would recite them all standing, apart from a few places where she had to perform them while sitting down. So the 4th Holy Imam asks his aunt that, why do I see you sometimes performing your prayers sitting down? And she says to him that it's because of the immense hunger and weakness that has come over me over the last 3 days. And then the 4th Holy Imam goes on to explain where this hunger and weakness came from. He says that this is because my aunt would distribute the little food that they would give us, and by little food, it was basically only a small piece of bread per day. She would distribute that among the children. So this is another way that she would care for the children and, of course, some of the women as well. So we have all of these examples from this great lady, and it really does tell us a lot about our duty and what we should be doing. First of all, with our family members, of course, first and foremost, they have rights over us, but also to others as well. Whatever help we can offer others, care for them, either in physical ways by just taking their hand, maybe helping them upstairs, down the stairs, whatever it might be, giving them a lift sometimes is so important, or helping them with shopping and things like that. It's all about caring for others. Or even as we'll see in a few moments' time, about visiting them in hospital. So there are plenty of ways that we can care for our family members and other members of the community, even the wider community, people who do not have the same beliefs as we do. This is all part of the duty of a Muslim, and inshallah, let's follow in the footsteps of the paragon of caring for others, Lady Zainab al-Kubra, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha. Let's move on to the second question now, and that is, what do modern studies tell us about the benefits of visiting the sick in hospital? This was something that was very interesting and also enlightening for me to find out. So I looked at various studies on this area, that is there really a tangible physical benefit when people go and visit the sick in hospitals? And the answer is yes. So, and then when we come to the Islamic instructions and advice about this, we'll see how the two relate. Often is the case that there's so much in our traditions and in the Quran, and for many, many years people might not really understand, okay, what is the scientific basis of this, or is that, really something that can be proven empirically, or whatever the case might be. And as the time progresses, more and more and more do we find out that yes, more and more things that have been recommended to us in our sources can be proven by science and using modern technology. So one of those things is the whole area of the benefits of visiting someone in hospital. So one of the studies I looked at was from Ohio State University. Now the researchers there found that indeed when people are visited in hospital after surgery by their friends, their recovery rates are quicker. Allahu Akbar. And so I looked into this much more, and I was really pleasantly surprised to find out the research in this area. So what they found was that when a person goes to visit their friend or relative, someone they know, in hospital after surgery, then what happens is their nerve-related pain lowers, and at the same time their inflammation levels lower quicker. That speeds up their recovery. So what is happening is, it seems that when people are visited in hospitals after surgery, their stress levels are reduced. When their stress levels are reduced, certain proteins are lowered. And when those proteins are lowered, it speeds up their recovery rate. So this is why it is so important to go and visit the sick in hospital. It really does help them physically, and it's been proven by science that their recovery rates are much better and faster than if they weren't visited. Now, one very interesting thing that came out of this study, and perhaps we can all relate to this, when we hear about somebody who's ill and we feel that, we really should do something about this, we might send them a WhatsApp message, isn't it? Right? Get well soon, or praying for your quick recovery, something like that. Or using social media and just electronically getting them a message. Well, that's still better than nothing. But the research showed that these faster recovery rates applied when the sick person was visited in person. So physically going and visiting that sick person resulted in their recovery being faster. So, my dear brothers and sisters, yes, it is better than nothing if we send a message to such people electronically, but it does not compare to going there physically and meeting up with them and really having that face-to-face contact, speaking with them, and then we'll come to the etiquette later on as to what should be done when we do visit the sick. So these are things which are there in our sources, and alhamdulillah, it's been proven by science. Now, of course, a lot of the time when we come across these things, we might not know why we have certain rulings, or why we are recommended to do this, or told not to do that. Either it's haram or it's makruh. But over the course of time, because technology and science and knowledge is always increasing, people, it might not even be in our lifetimes, people eventually, gradually begin to see the wisdom behind it. And that's when they realize that actually science is really just saying the same thing as what our traditional sources have said for 1400 years plus. And this is one of those areas. So please, my dear brothers and sisters, sometimes if you come across things that you really can't fathom, that's fine. It's always been the case from the start that there have been many things that people haven't been able to understand. Why? Why do we have to do it like this? Why can't we do that? But over a period of time, perhaps the answers will become evident through the increase in knowledge and the progress in technology and science. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, of course, when we look at this, we can explain it using theological discussions and look at it from a religious perspective as well. What is happening when these people are getting better or they're getting treatment in a regular manner? Let's say from doctors, nurses, and of course, now we know that they're also improving their health by us visiting them, all right? So there's doctors taking care of them, nurses, we are visiting them. All of these human agents are helping that poor person, that ill person to get better. What is happening? How can we explain this from a theological and religious perspective? Well, you will recall, inshallah, that quite a few nights ago we spoke about how a human being is really or should be manifesting the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine names, all the Asma'ul Husna, up to the level that he or she possibly can. Because obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has those attributes at the perfect level, unlimited, absolute level, whereas we manifest them at our own levels, which is totally restricted and limited. But in any case, that's the aim, to manifest those attributes within our character as much as we possibly can. So it's the same thing with this whole discussion about helping people to get better. What are two of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, two of his names that relate to getting better and curing and healing? You will, I'm sure, think of his name Ash-Shafi, isn't it, right? Ash-Shafi, the healer. That's one of his names. Another one is Al-Mu'afi, the bestower of health. So these are two names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we are supposed to manifest his names in our character, then these are two of the names that we must try and manifest. So in one way, we are therefore, us, the doctors, the nurses who are helping the ill person get better, we are manifesting these names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our own way, at our own level. And so from a religious and theological perspective, we can explain what's happening in this way, that we, the doctors and the nurses, and us who are visiting the sick, are being agents. We are being channels through which Allah's shifa is reaching that ill person. So they are getting better, yes. And who is the ultimate healer, bestower of health? Ash-Shafi and Al-Mu'afi. It is, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the ultimate healer. He does the healing. But he does so by channeling all of that grace and mercy to help that person through the intermediaries that there are there in human form, i.e. the people who are going to have an effect on the ill person. Us, by visiting them, the doctors, the nurses, even the medicine and the treatment that they take, all of that is really a channel for Allah's shifa to come to that poor person, and hence he gets better. In the Quran, we have the same concept. I'd like to quote Nabi Ibrahim, ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam, from Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, where he says in the Quran, it's the same verse I recited at the beginning of this majlis, وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينَ. When I become ill, it is He who cures me. Right? He is the Ash-Shafi and Al-Mu'afi. So definitely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate healer and the bestower of good health, but He does so in this manner. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, I'd like to point to another prophet in the Quran who is renowned for healing. And of course, I'm referring to Nabi Isa ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, Jesus, he is obviously renowned and is mentioned both in the Bible and in the Quran as having this miraculous quality of being able to heal the sick. So there are a couple of places where this is mentioned, in particular 2 places. So we have in Surah Al Imran, verse number 49, and also in Surah Ma'idah, verse 110, where a number of His miracles are mentioned. Now, when these miracles are mentioned, among them are listed 2, which relate to our discussion. So in, for example, Al Imran, verse number 49, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says through the words of Nabi Isa, وَأُبْرِئُ الْأَكْمَهَ وَالْأَبْرَصَ وَأُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. That means that I cure the blind and the leper, and I revive the dead with God's permission. Okay, with God's permission. Now, the fascinating thing here, very, very interesting and important thing to note, is that the words bi-idhnillah were already mentioned in the same verse with regard to another one of His miracles. Just before that, He talks about the miracle of turning a clay bird into a real bird. All right, and the other miracles mentioned in this verse are the fact that He can tell people what they ate and what they store in their houses. And altogether, you have these 2 verses talking about His miracles. This verse says this part of the verse says at the end, bi-idhnillah, with the permission of Allah. But like I said, just before that, when He talks about the miracle of turning a clay bird into a real bird, it says bi-idhnillah. So what was the point of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeating those words? It means by the permission of Allah. So He makes the clay bird into a real bird bi-idhnillah, with the permission of Allah. Then this part about curing the blind and the leper and bringing the dead alive bi-idhnillah. Why? Why would Allah repeat that? Think about it. Why would He repeat it? And especially with regard to Nabi Isa, not with regard to other prophets and their miracles. Why Nabi Isa? Think about how, the times were, and also related to other religions. Then in verse number 110 of Surah Ma'idah, where again His miracles are listed, there, even more interestingly, the words bi-idhni are mentioned 4 times. The difference between there and here, bi-idhni means by my permission. There, by Allah's permission, right? So, altogether, we have how many mentions of Allah's permission with regard to Nabi Isa's miraculous qualities? 6. 2 in that, 4 in this. 6 times the permission of God is mentioned after reporting and listing the miracles of Nabi Isa. Why? And only him, not other prophets. Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to say here. First of all, remember Nabi Isa being this great prophet, not just of Muslims but of Christians. It was incumbent in order to reject the belief in Trinity and Nabi Isa being a God, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this absolutely clear that He is no God and He is a prophet. Everything that He does, all the miraculous things, all the extraordinary feats that He performs, it's all with the permission of God. So that was the first reason I'd like to point out, that in order to dispel this erroneous belief that Jesus was some deity, some God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned 6 times. That's really remarkable, because He is the most eloquent of speakers, and if there's going to be any repetition of the same words, there has to be some deep wisdom behind it. Otherwise, people don't repeat, let alone the most eloquent of speakers. There has to be wisdom. This is one of them. The other thing that I'd like to mention is the fact that just as Nabi Isa in these 2 verses clearly is stating that him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the other one, that or every extraordinary feat that he performs is with Allah's permission, and he has nothing independently from himself, we need to expand that and apply it to all the awliya of Allah, whether they are prophets or the imams or any of the infallibles, even non-infallibles. When we hear of great saints and friends of God, ordinary people who have been blessed because of their proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being able to do certain extraordinary things, we always have to bear in mind that they cannot do them independently. They are getting everything from God. Like I said, they are channels, they are agents of God's mercy and grace in order for Allah's names to be manifested. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, when we come across things like the imams doing extraordinary things or the prophets doing extraordinary things, we cannot take it to an extreme level and think that somehow they themselves are, deities or coming close to, becoming like that. No, they are simply manifesting the attributes of God when they are doing those things, depending on the miracle, depending on the feat, which attribute they are manifesting. And it's all bi-idhnillah. Just as Nabi Isa repeats it in that verse twice, God repeats it in the other verse 4 times. Please, let's all remember this and bear in mind that all of this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So let me just narrate a story where Nabi Isa demonstrates, first of all, that he healed people with the permission of God, and that he couldn't do anything without the permission of God, right? And like I said, this applies to all the awliya of Allah, whether they are imams or prophets. So there was this Canaanite woman who wasn't a Jew, and she had this paralyzed son. Now, Nabi Isa, sometimes people would gather in thousands to be cured because he had this miraculous quality. And amazingly, we'll come to visiting the sick from our sources in a few moments' time. Amazingly, if Nabi Isa could, cure them while they were waiting for him, fine. If not, he would go to them. He would go to the sick person and cure them. So this is also a lesson for us to visit the sick. If Nabi Isa can do that when thousands are waiting for him and his time is all totally taken up, then surely we can go to the sick and inshallah help them. Like I said, it has these amazing qualities, just visiting the sick. All right, so now this Canaanite woman, she had a paralyzed son. And of course, news has spread about Nabi Isa's wondrous qualities of healing. So she comes to him and says to him that, Ya Ruhullah, the Spirit of God, his title, cure my paralyzed son. So he says to her that I've only been authorized to effect a cure for the Israelites. And she was a Canaanite, so she wasn't a Jew. So she says to him that, look, even dogs receive scraps from the table of their masters. So, do us a favor, effectively. Do us a favor and let us benefit from your wisdom and she beseeches him to cure her paralyzed son. Nabi Isa asks permission from God. You see, all to do with getting permission from God, whether it's a prophet or an imam. They can't do anything independently. Then God gives him that permission and he cures that woman's paralyzed son. So this was just an example of how he did this, and also the fact that he needed Allah's permission. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let's move on then to the third question, and that is, what are the etiquettes of visiting the sick? Are there any etiquettes, or we just go there with our grapes and chocolates and then that's it, job done? There are etiquettes, there are adab of visiting the sick. These have all been spelled out to us in our sources. So first of all, let's have a look at this beautiful tradition from none other than the Messenger of Allah, Rasulul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says that when you visit the sick, first make contact hand to hand, okay? So shake their hands. Of course, all of this applies, if it's permissible in that particular hospital, in that ward. And of course, the rules of mahramiyya apply. If it's, from a shari perspective, a legal perspective, you are allowed to have physical contact with that person, then yes. He says, make physical contact, shake their hands. That's one thing. Secondly, put your hand on their forehead. Thirdly, ask about their health. Right? These are all the adab. Ask about their health. Fourthly, pray for their long life and instill hope in them that they will have a long life. Especially, I assume this would be applicable to someone who is like terminally ill or very seriously ill, or fears that perhaps their life is going to be shortly lived now. But instill hope in them of a long life. And then he says something remarkable. He says that ask them to pray for you. Ask the marid to pray for you. For the prayer of a person who is sick is like the prayer of angels. So let's, inshallah, use this as a way to not only visit the sick, but as a source of inspiration. That we will definitely benefit a lot if we visit the sick, just as they will benefit as well. From another tradition, from this time, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We are told that keep your visit short, believe it or not, unless the person wants you to stay there longer. Sometimes, maybe we have good intentions, we hang around, and instead of making the person better, we make them more ill, right? So keep the visit short. Unless the person wants you to stay longer, he feels, or she feels somehow, comforted by your presence, and they are requesting, then it's something different. Otherwise, keep it short. Some other things we can do from other sources, we can bring a gift. We should, these are all part of the adab, so we should bring a gift. We should recite du'as for them. Also, we are told that give sadaqah on their behalf, right? That means give some charity to poor people, but with the intention of that ill person, right? Give it on their behalf. Bring them zamzam, right, to drink. And of course, the turba of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I mentioned a few nights ago the story of Ayatollah Sayyid Hussein Tabatabai Burujardi, and how his illness of his eyes became better simply by taking some of the dirt that was rubbed onto the shirt of one of the azadar, one of the mourners of Sayyid al-Shuhada on that mourning procession. And when he just took that with that intention that inshallah this will effect a cure for his eyes, it really did so. And that pain he had for many years went immediately, and he never had to wear glasses. So this is not just the turba of Sayyid al-Shuhada, but other things that are associated with this great Imam. When people do it with sincerity and it's done in a way that they are using Sayyid al-Shuhada as an intermediary, not as someone, directly who can do this independently of God. They do it properly, sincerely, with conviction in Allah's, healing abilities, because فَهُوَ يَشْفِينَ, as that verse says that I mentioned earlier, He is the one who effects a cure. Then it can have amazing properties. The turba of Sayyid al-Shuhada, we are told in our fiqh rulings. Look at, for example, the rulings of your marja with regards to the shifa of turba. That it is haram, first of all, to eat any mud or soil. Right? It's haram. You can't eat mud or soil. But there's an exception. And that is the turba, the clay or the soil taken from the area of the grave of Imam Hussein salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. But just as a fiqh point, bear in mind that the ruling states only to the extent the size of an average chickpea. All right, so just a small amount. If it's for medicinal purposes, it's allowed. All right, it's allowed. But just that size of an average chickpea. So these are other things that we can certainly do in order to have implemented the adab which is there in our sources about visiting the sick. Fourth and final question: what are the rewards of visiting the sick? Well, we saw the rewards for the sick person. They can heal better and quicker. And of course, we have lots of spiritual advice as to how it should be done. But now, what about for us? Is there anything in it for us? Oh, there's even more in it for us than the person we are visiting. So, for example, we are told that in one of the traditions from Rasulul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, that on the day of judgment, He will complain, right? He will rebuke some of the believers He's reporting that Allah will reprimand some of the believers for not visiting the sick. So Allah will say on the day of judgment that, why didn't you come and visit me when I was sick? Right? Allah is saying this. And the believer will say, Subhanaka, Subhanaka, immaculate are you. You don't feel any pain of sickness. You don't get ill. Right? Of course, Allah doesn't get ill. What is the response from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He says, well, your fellow brother in faith was ill and you didn't visit him. If you had visited him, you would have found me next to him. And I would have fulfilled all of your needs. So, the first benefit of visiting the sick is that our needs are fulfilled. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say on the day of resurrection that He was next to the ill person. Of course, this is all metaphorical and symbolic. It means that visiting the sick has this great impact. And visiting the sick is like visiting Allah. And Allah will fulfill our needs for us if we do that. That's the first thing. We have a tradition from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, where he says, the one who visits the sick, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will entrust an angel to be with that person in his grave until resurrection. It would be beautiful to have an angel entrusted to us while we are in our graves until we are resurrected. And that's all because of visiting the sick. And then thirdly, from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, the one who visits the sick, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will appoint 70,000 angels to accompany him or her. When they visit the sick, they will seek forgiveness for that person until they reach home. 70,000 angels will do istighfar for that person. So my dear brothers and sisters, all of these benefits are there. Let's inshallah embody the attributes that paragon of caring for others embodied, Zainab al-Kubra, and inshallah look after others, including visiting the sick. So as a summary, in terms of the 4 questions, first of all, we gave those 5 examples of the Holy Lady Zainab caring for others. Secondly, with regard to the studies that are there in modern science, it has those health benefits of the sick person gets better quicker and heals faster. Thirdly, we spelled out those etiquettes of visiting the sick. And fourthly, there are enormous rewards for the person who visits the sick. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq to do that. Being the last majlis in the current series, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to all of you. You have really made me feel welcome, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to be with you all this Muharram. Please forgive me for my shortcomings and remember me in your prayers as I will remember you. Inshallah, we will meet again. And in particular, I would like to give a special thanks to the EC of the community. So Asim and Jabir and Mustafa and Samir, and of course head of the AV, Muhammad Ali. And also a special thanks to my great hosts, my dear uncle and aunt, Akbar Bhai and Zara Bhai. So let's end with a dua before we go into the Masa'ib. That may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all and all of us, in fact, both as individuals and as a community, inshallah. Oh Allah, we ask you to protect and hasten the appearance of our Imam. Oh Allah, enable us to perform our duties by following in the footsteps of these great paragons of virtue, inshallah. Oh Allah, forgive us and our forefathers for our sins. Oh Allah, enable us to live and die according to the teachings of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And oh Allah, bring relief to all those facing hardships around the world. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibna Rasulullah. We'll spend a few moments remembering the calamities that befell the sacred head of Sayyidul Shuhada. This sacred head that Rasulullah would kiss with so much affection and love. This sacred head that would lie in the lap of his holy mother, the Holy Lady Fatimatu Zahra. What befell this head on the day of Ashura? Well, the reports tell us that it was struck 3 times on the day of Ashura. The first time an arrow was shot into the forehead of Abu Abdullah. As he pulled it out, all the blood ran onto his face and onto his beard. And he calls out to Allah. He says, "Oh Allah, you see the condition I am in." The second time, a stone was thrown onto the forehead of Abu Abdullah as he spent a moment just to rest. The third time, somebody struck him over his head with a sword. And now Abu Abdullah's head was injured to such an extent that all the blood was flowing over his face, over his beard, and over his chest. But mu'mineen, this wasn't the only things they did to the sacred head of Sayyidul Shuhada. This wasn't enough for these evil people. For then, after it had been separated from the holy body, they placed it on top of a spear and they paraded it through the streets of Kufa and Sham. But my brothers and sisters, even that wasn't enough. For now, the sacred head was brought to Sham. Sahal ibn Sa'd reports Sahal ibn Sa'd was this companion of the Prophet. He says that when I entered Sham, I saw people rejoicing. They said to me that the captives are being brought from Karbala to Sham, and included with that is a head. This head is being brought as a present from the land of Iraq to Sham. He says that he went to the gate where the women and the children were being brought in. He saw one flag coming after another. He must have also seen the women and children chained. He must have seen them being hit and being pushed around and being sworn at. Some of them were on saddleless camels. Now when these women and children come in, Sahal ibn Sa'd goes up to one of them. It's a young girl. He says, "Oh daughter, who are you?" She says, "I am Sakina, the daughter of Hussein." Sahal ibn Sa'd says to her that, "Oh my daughter, can I do anything for you? For I am Sahal ibn Sa'd. I heard traditions from your grandfather." Sakina says to him, "Oh Sahal, tell this person who is bearing this head on his spear to move away from us, so that the people become busy looking at the spear and the head on it rather than looking at us, for we are the family of the Messenger of Allah." But now, mu'mineen, even this wasn't enough. For now the sacred head is brought into the palace of Yazid. It's reported that at that time he's having a type of party where alcohol is being served. Yazid looks at the head which has been brought to him on a gold plate. The head is placed in front of Yazid. Now Yazid drinks wine in front of the sacred head. But now he does something that is so evil, only someone like him could do. He takes his stick and he starts hitting the teeth of that sacred head. Allah la'natullah ala qawmi zalimeen. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ يَا حُسَيْنُ يَا حُسَيْنُ يَا حُسَيْنُ.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, चल के हुए हैं आंसू आँखों के जाम ले लो, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, चल के हुए हैं आंसू आँखों के जाम ले लो, हसरत की सुबह ले लो, गुर्बत की शाम ले लो, और साहिबे अज़ा का मौला सलाम ले लो, टूटे हुए दिलों का मुरकर सलाम ले लो, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, आका सलाम मौला सलाम ले लो, चल के हुए हैं आंसू आँखों के जाम, शिमरे लाई चलाई शमशीर किस गले पर, ज़हरा के दिल पे जालिम खंजर तेरा रवा है, ए दर्द दिल संभलना ये वक्त इम्तिहान है, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, चल के हुए हैं आंसू आँखों के जाम ले लो, अब्बास के अलम की याद आएगी निशानी, पानी तो गिर चुका है, टुकड़े है गम से सीना, आंसू बहा रहा है मशकी ज़ाए सकीना, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, आका सलाम ले लो, मौला सलाम ले लो, चल के हुए हैं आंसू आँखों के जाम, خوں میں تڑپ رہا ہے کریل جوان بیٹا، شبیر ہے اکیلے میت بری جواں ہے، لیلا سنبھال لینا اکبر کی لاش لے کر، آقا سلام لے لو مولا سلام لے لو، آقا سلام لے لو مولا سلام لے لو، چل کے ہوئے ہیں آنسو آنکھوں کے جام لے لو، یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، پاؤں میں بیڑی تو کے گرا بار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار. بھولے گا نہ وہ منظر نیزے پہ سر سرور، بھولے گا نہ وہ منظر نیزے پہ سر سرور، بے مکنا بے چادر بلوے میں پھپھی مادر، اور مجمع کفار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار. بازار کی زیبائی کھوٹوں پہ تماشائی، بازار کی زیبائی کھوٹوں پہ تماشائی، ادا کی سفر آئی اور عالم تنہائی، وہ بے کس و لاچار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام. بو پائی تو گھبرا کر بچی نے کہاں رو کر، بو پائی تو گھبرا کر بچی نے کہاں رو کر، اس دشت میں جو ہے سر وہ تو ہے سارے سرور، کیسے کروں دیدار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار. حاکم نے یہ سن پایا تو اور ستم ڈھایا، حاکم نے یہ سن پایا تو اور ستم ڈھایا، سرپوش کو سرکایا اور بچی کو دکھلایا، چلائی وہ ایک بار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار. کچھ شمر سے فرما دو گردن میری کھلوا دو، کچھ شمر سے فرما دو گردن میری کھلوا دو، سر بابا کا دلوا دو یا اس کو یہ سمجھا دو، مارے نہ ستمگار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار عابد بیمار، شام کا بازار. یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین. محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللہم صل علی Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, before we do the ziyarat, Shaykh gave such an excellent lecture on visiting the sick. Right now we can't visit the sick, but let's all do dua and pray for our sick brothers and sisters in our community and all around the world with ayat al-shifa. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَ إِذَا دَعَاهُ يَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَ إِذَا دَعَاهُ يَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَ إِذَا دَعَاهُ يَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك، عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله الآخر أحدي مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميع رحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الحادي المهدي. السلام عليك يا صاحب الأجر والزمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك ودهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا وذليلا وأينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
I would ask you Adhan.